Hello and welcome to another Careers YouTube video. My name is Sarah Gifford. I am the Careers Information Advice and Guidance Lead within Kaplan. And once again, I'm delighted to be joined by CK from Dublin Business School. Hello, CK.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
I'm very good. Do you want to introduce yourself? Because I know you don't go by CK, do you? By other people?
Yeah, so hi guys, my name is Nzaki Paco McKevitt, but everybody calls me CK. And if you've been watching us over the last couple of weeks of our YouTube videos, you'll know that my intro is Calvin Klein, same style, just not as expensive yet. So it's an honor and absolutely delighted to be back here again with Sarah.
Fantastic. So today we're going to be talking about remote communication for potential leaders. And this is really for individuals who might be looking to either apply for a leadership position, either in their current employers or with a new employer if you're fresh out of college, university, whatever it might be. In this new environment, remote is the way to go. A new report came out from Microsoft Surface and YouGov entitled Work Smarter to Live Better. And they found that almost 9 out of 10 employees reported that their business had adapted to this hybrid working. So not always working from home or always working remotely, but a hybrid of working both in the office and remotely. So this is going to be something that all potential leaders will have to face at some point, having to manage individuals when they're not in the office, when they're not sitting next to you. The report that I mentioned, we'll make sure that we link it into the description at the bottom, but it also identified that over half of those individuals who completed the survey felt that they had pressures from, on their time, and about 65% of them said that the thing that they missed the most was social interactions with their colleagues. So I think leaders and potential leaders have a really important role to play in how they effectively communicate with their team members to kind of mitigate some of those kind of elements of remote working.
I completely agree with that, Sarah.
So let's take a look at what it is that we're going to be covering today. So we're going to talk to you a little bit, or rather CK is going to talk to you a little bit about the ways of communicating and communication styles. We're also going to talk to you about the benefits and the importance of having really quick 15-minute one-to-one sessions with your employees. We're going to make sure that you understand what it means to clarify expectations, the best way that you can utilize technology, and there's so much out there at the moment. So what's going to work best for your team? I'm going to end on looking at some of the barriers to communication, how you might be able to overcome that. And then finally at the end, we're going to give you a few ideas of what you can take away to build on your communication skills as a remote leader. So I'm not going to do anything else other than hand over to CK, and we'll take a look at ways of communicating. CK, over to you.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm just going to go to the next slide there, Sarah. So just in regards of ways of communicating, leaders have always been equipped with the responsibility of communicating, whether it's strategies or the organization's goals, or it might be just in the general direction of where you want the organization to go. So I personally feel that it's really important that all staff and employees are included when you're talking about the mission and when you're talking about the next steps and strategy, because they're essentially going to be involved and within the process, and they're going to be able to deliver on that. How are you supposed to get an employee or a member of your team to push the agenda or to work towards the mission if they don't fully understand it and you haven't taken the time to clarify and communicate that? So that's the first thing. And when we look at remote working, was new for us last year. I know a lot of organizations did not exactly specialize, but I did know a lot of the organizations did have remote working, availability there. One of my previous jobs in HR, I used to kind of have the option sometimes of sitting at home, and if I really had a lot of things to get through. And Sarah, I think you're kind of in the same boat. You have that flexibility to either work in the office or work from home. But now we were moved into a sense where we had to work from home, and it was a lot to adjust for some people. So when I think about that, I think about how are you supposed to communicate, where usually, I'll give you an example, our team would sit down together every Monday morning and have a team meeting, and all of us would be in attendance. So you're looking at it now, it's like, okay, so how can I continue to have that level of interaction? How can I continue to have that level of motivating or even just speaking to my employees? And this is where we had to look at the likes of the different means of communication as well as the benefits of it as well. I firmly believe that not one size would fit all organization and all teams and departments. It depends on what you do and kind of what is the preferred method, if you will. And that's why I just wrote the different ways we communicate now recently is more the likes of email and direct message. We have a rule over in DBS. It's not a rule, but one of the policies in DBS is that, you know, use direct messenger, use the direct, the IM, the instant messenger. It's quick, especially if it's just a small little question that you have, rather than sending out a long email. Because Sarah, I'm sure you're aware, I'm not the only one that has, you know, a surplus of emails coming in every day from students as well as colleagues. So sometimes it kind of just allows you to not be sitting there kind of clearing through emails for like an hour. So getting direct messages is really, really good. Phone calls as well have just kind of risen in the sense of having a quick chat about, you know, what is the project, you know, where are we on the project, and is there anyone that you might need to follow up on, is there any help that I can provide you as well, and us to be able to accomplish this project in the projected timelines. Video chat as well. I love video chat just because it makes me feel like I'm still speaking to a person face to face, because I've been based remotely now for nearly the guts of a year. Actually, oh yes, it's about a year, because give or take a couple of months. And the one thing I can find just with the video chat is that I feel as if I'm speaking to someone face to face, and I feel as if I'm not losing that interaction. Right. And then the last bit then is obviously face to face, because some of us have been going back into work, and some of us are, you know, lucky enough to be able to still go back in and, you know, interact and be able to communicate with, you know, line managers as well as colleagues and peers. So that's really kind of what we're talking about here in regards of ways of communication. I also just firmly believe as well, just in the likes of, if you think about the message that you're trying to relay, this is where you can decide what is the best means of communication for this.
That's
so
right.
I'm very fortunate. Me and Sarah have a close relationship, and we get to talk a lot of the time, and we just kind of bounce ideas off each other. And both of us are kind of old school. So if we have a phone call, we'll always have a notebook right there to kind of write out what it is that we talked about, especially if we're deciding on a project, or like me, we have a lot of ideas, guys, so just bear with us. But in that sense, it's more in the sense of, you know, what is the best means of communicating for you. One size does not fit all. I might like the video chat option. However, at the same time, while I'm on video chat, I still will be taking notes. Sarah, I'd be curious to know, what's your, you know, preferred method of communicating with your team?
That's a really interesting question, CK, because I'm quite a sociable person, but actually I prefer email. And the reason for that is because I can hold myself accountable, because it's all there written down. I'm not forgetting things. Like you said, you and I, when we're discussing things, always have a notepad and pen. That's because I have a terrible memory. And actually, if someone puts it down into an email, you know, highlights when the deadline is, I know that I can pick that piece of work up and take it forward. But like you said, it really needs to, the way in which you communicate with individuals needs to, you know, be effective for the nature of your, you know, question, whether that's a discussion, whether that's a request, you know, whether it's a, you know, what is it that you're trying to get out of that, and what therefore what is the best communication tool you need to use to have that conversation.
Exactly, that's exactly it. And I do know that just in regards to things like confidentiality, it might be better to meet face to face, depending on the subject matter. You know, it's a sensitive topic. Because I was thinking in my head, you know, and I don't like to think of, like, if you're thinking of disciplinary or maybe having to have a discussion with someone in regards of behavior or anything like that, I would not like to have my manager call me over video chat or a phone call. I prefer to have that type of meeting face to face, because it is confidential. If I'm on the phone, who's listening? You know,
That's
who
right.
might be around, who might be in the background, and that's something video. And look, I'm not going to be one of those people, those kind of people who is always like, they're always watching us. I don't know that just in regards to video chat, but it's one of the things that I'm always conscious of as well, is that when you are speaking to somebody about sensitive information, it's important to have that face-to-face interaction, because it is key. And we deal a lot with students, and students would escalate issues that do require that, you know, that kind of gentler touch.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that gentler touch needs to be done in the likes of a face-to-face interaction rather than it being over email, where perceptions can be misconstrued and miscommunication can happen really easily, because you might decide that the tone of the email was inappropriate, or you might decide that the way it's been directed at you, you feel like it's
Absolutely.
attacking you.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's face to face, you get to see somebody's body language, you get to see their facial expressions, as well as basically being able to see like, okay, I'm in a place where I am in a safe space, so I can voice my opinions. And that's it. And the other thing is, not just with the video and the phone call, is I'm always conscious of who could be listening. Especially because, like we said, if it's confidential information, you don't want that information to go into the wrong hands.
That's right. Yeah. So make sure really that you're using the right communication tool for the right moment. That's really what we're saying.
Exactly.
So let's take a look at the kind of communication styles that you might be adopting as a potential leader.
Yeah. So we always say, when you think of leadership, so I have been in so many panels discussing leadership skills, and communication always comes up as number one, but we don't sit there and really kind of dig deep into what communication style really is. And I think sometimes a lot of people assume that a communication style means how you speak on your approach to it, and it's so much more than that. So this is just a little list in regards of the types of, you know, communication styles that would be based on different situational needs as well. The one thing as a leader that you need to be is flexible, so you would need to adopt your communication styles based on the situation. And an example we're always going to be continuously using is when the pandemic happened, you know, your style of communication had to be changed, because like Sarah, if you're used to, you know, communicating on email, and now all of a sudden you had video calls and having to incorporate that into your style of communication, because you had to address the entire team on Google Meets, or it might be on Zoom. And we'll be talking about technology a little bit down the line, but like that, it's something that you really kind of have to think about, in the sense of, how can I communicate? What is the best style to use in this instance? Specifically, if you are going to be using the means of technology a lot more, or if you are going to not have those team meetings that you used to have all the time. Especially as well when it comes to the types of people that you are going to be kind of speaking to, because we at ABS have had employees join the organization, and I think about my time when I started in Dublin Business School, and how I got the opportunity to walk around the campus. I got the opportunity to actually build relationships with people in different departments by walking to these different departments and introducing myself and speaking to them that way. It's different now. It's an email that might go on when you start, and I just feel as if like it's a little bit harder. So as a potential leader, or as a leader, you have to look at these communication styles and really think about, you know, what is the best way for it. So listening is essentially extremely important. Listening to your employees need to feel like they've been heard.
Absolutely.
And
even remotely, you know, active listening, we can sometimes think it's just about having active listening when you're face to face, but utilizing those regulators, you know, I see, nodding your head, all of these will help an individual when they're having maybe a video call or even a call with you, to feel like they're really being heard.
Exactly. And it's even things such as it might be the likes of responding back to an email. So you to be like, oh, I did hear what you said, and I have received that email, and I know I need to follow up on that. Because there's some emails, there has been a lot of emails that have been circulating lately, just because it's the only means of communication that we have. However, I also think it's important to respond every now and again, because whilst that email might have gone out to, you know, X amount of employees, that leader is still wondering, in the sense of, is the message clear? Is the message concise? You know, does anybody have any questions on this? And this is a great way of being able to really showcase that as well. And it's a way for a potential leader to showcase that they're listening to your opinions and they value your feedback. And the likes of coaching as well, slightly changed because it's all online. I've struggled with this a little bit, just in regards to coaching, because like Sarah, I'm a very social person. So interaction to me is very important in my role. So having to do coaching kind of sessions online it wasn't difficult to adapt to, but it was new. It was something that was new, and it did require me to kind of having to adapt to this situation. So this is going to be the exact same thing for any potential leaders. You still need to be providing that coaching element when you are leading your team, and coaching your employees, and being able to have that open relationship as well, where you can both learn from each other, because coaching does not go just one way.
No.
It's almost similar to mentorship. It goes both ways. So there are things that you might be able to learn about yourself. So an example might be, maybe you always speak towards and kind of direct towards your employees, and it's more that you're not kind of having that back to forth interaction. That might be it. Teaching as well is a little bit different. So if you think about the likes of utilizing technology, if you were in the office with me, I would be able to teach you how to use the systems. I might be able to teach you on how to utilize different folders, let's say in the Google Drive, whatever it might be. So you need to adapt this as well to the likes of the situation that you're in. And it's the same with directing as well, because like I said, when we talked about the ways of communicating, if you have to direct an employee to do something, there's specific ways that you might communicate that information, and not just in an email type of format, because
you picked up on that tone. How one person will read it will be very different to how another person will read it.
Exactly. And that's exactly it. So sometimes it might be the likes of, if you're directing, you might have that phone call, or you might have that face-to-face interaction before you put it in an email. And it's the same with advising and motivating as well. So you always are going to have to kind of change up your style, specifically on the types of employees that you have. Some employees might kind of accept more advice more than if you're being direct with them, and the same thing with teaching and coaching as well, because teaching and coaching are similar. However, they do both have different connotations when you kind of walk away from it. And motivating as well, it's going to be the exact same. So it's just things to consider, specifically when you are looking at getting out there and building relationships, we will say, with your employees, and building that level of trust where you can trust them to do their role, and for them to be able to perform well at home, and be able to come to you and be able to have that conversation when they are struggling, because they know that you are the coach, that you're going to be there for them, be able to listen to them as well, or provide them with the likes of motivating. Because some of the things that we might think about is, so Sarah, I'm not too sure with your team, but like, if you think about what are some of the challenges that come with working from home, would you not like it if you had a manager who you could actually communicate those challenges with, and rather than it being something like, well, you need to find a way to work around that, you can both sit down and talk about, okay, this is how we can make it work for you. How about your hours might slightly change because of the fact that we know that you have elderly parents at home that you might be worried about, and you have to kind of take care of now during the day. Maybe that's something that you have to do.
Absolutely,
and it means working a little bit later.
And I think building on that, it's really, you've got to have that element of trust, haven't you, for that employee to open up and say that that's how they're feeling, or that's what they're needing from you as a leader. And so that element of making sure that you've got that strong relationship is really key. Making sure that at the start of every meeting you ask them how they're doing. You have that moment in the day where you can have a little bit of a chat or a debrief, and just say that was a difficult week, how did you find it, what are you going to do this weekend? Just build up that rapport. So I think taking a look in a little bit more detail at kind of our how you might be having those conversations. I really liked your suggestion here, CK, on having those 15-minute catch-ups.
So I was looking at this from the perspective of group meetings as well as those one-to-one sessions, and I thought of the CK when she first started her HR role, and how she was a little bit afraid to speak out when we were in a group. So in my first role, I started off as a recruitment coordinator before I got promoted to HR business support. And I remember that we used to have team meetings every Friday. So we used to sit in this big boardroom, with the big chairs and like this glass table, and Sarah, how small I am. So I felt like a little child. I felt like I was a child playing dress up. It was really intimidating. And I remember that it was very hard for me to actually speak up and actually voice my opinion or feedback about something that, we were really talking about the week. So we were talking about recruitment strategies, we were talking about the processes. So maybe a new recruitment process was being introduced, and this was how they would announce it to us in the team. And we were allowed, and this was what was crazy, is that we had such an open door policy and such a flat structure that the HR director would welcome your opinions or feedback about why you didn't think that the process would work. And I remember I never spoke up. I didn't speak up at all. And that's where this is coming from, is that some employees don't feel comfortable speaking up in a room full of
That's
people.
right.
However, when you are working in an office all together, you have that relationship or that type of environment where they can come into your office. You know, they can kind of pull you aside to tell you like, oh, I really like the idea, but
And
I do
you as
see
a
these
man,
challenges.
you and as a leader can pick up on those cues. You know, the
Yeah.
person who's not making eye contact, who's
Yeah.
maybe fiddling with their fingers, whatever it is a little bit nervous around those larger groups. You can pick up on some of those cues which you might not be able to do over video chat.
Exactly. And even some of the things that with that is maybe your team is just really large. And even if you think about, so I think about the style of communicating and how some people have a really big presence and how that can actually make somebody else feel really intimidated, and because they don't have that type of presence, and specifically when talking or discussing about anything that they're really interested in. So the 15-minute one-to-one sessions is having a 15 minutes where it's quick because you have a focused agenda. So you have items that you want to talk about, and it's not going to turn into an hour and a half session or a therapy session for an hour. It's nothing like that. It's more in the sense that you're quick and concise. It's 15 minutes, really check on the employee. How are they doing? How are they getting on? Are there any issues that they want to bring forward? And you're really getting straight to the point of the most important issues and kind of what needs to be addressed, rather than having to, wait for a performance review for the issues to be highlighted, or wait until the likes of, and this happens a lot of times as well, where someone will tell you exactly how they feel when they're leaving the organization. And that's what's even worse, because now you have no opportunity to change it or even address the issue because they're saying it on their way out the door. So the 15-minute one-to-one sessions really gives employees that sense of, I've been heard, they know how I feel. Or it might be the sense of, I'm actually struggling in these areas, and she knows that I need additional support, he knows I need additional support in an area to do with the project, or it might be to do with changing your working hours, things like that as well. Or even it might be the sense of addressing, maybe another employee feels like they're doing a lot more than another, because now you're not in office anymore. So how do you know that your colleague is really kind of pushing as much as you are, and then you're also now overthinking and being like, oh, maybe I need to do more. She seems to be always on LinkedIn, or she seems to be always sending emails. I'm not doing half as much. And this is where you could actually kind of put that overthinking to rest, and your employer can reassure you, as well as kind of just give you kind of that little 15 minutes to rant or vent or do whatever it is that needs to be done. And then you can actually address the employee issues, because you will see a lot of the times that not like, if you have a team of 10, I bet you 5 of those employees are having the exact same issues, and they feel like they're the only ones that are going through them. So this allows you as a potential leader to be able to address them, highlight these issues, and actually put an effective plan into place so that you could actually address them. And it's not a sense of leaving it on the long finger where, like I said before, you get this information at a performance review where it's 9 months down the line, or you get it on someone's exit interview.
I love that it's only 15 minutes. It helps to kind of build up that rapport that we talked about earlier, which is so important, building up that really quick relationship.
Yeah,
definitely. Here you got a slide on clarifying expectations. Talk to me a little bit about what that looks like.
Okay, so I was coming at this at the point of, when you look at your strategy and you look at your key performance indicators, when you're in the office and you can observe, and there's certain things that you can kind of sit down and be like, okay, this is being done. My manager, the head of student experience, can see on average, on a face-to-face interaction, how many students I deal with, because they come into the office, and he's in the office as well. So he could hear the types of issues that students are coming in to ask questions about, or it might be the sense of what our students, maybe they need a little bit of help, and he'll hear, okay, there's 5 students who've come in asking, inquiring about part-time jobs. So this is a great way for us to put on, part-time jobs workshops, or it might be the sense of actually getting employers in to speak to students about part-time work, whatever it might be. And this is where I was like, it's a clarification of expectations, rather than it being, what work are you doing? Have you done this? What tasks have you completed? It's more in the sense of looking at it as what is being accomplished, because the world of work has changed. So what is it that you're accomplishing now? And that's something that we can address and something that we can kind of look at. Okay, this is working. So how can we kind of elongate this, and how can we continue this and build this into our strategy going
Absolutely.
forward? Because now we're going to be looking at hybrid working, and that's what I meant by that. And then looking at the challenges at home and how do we manage it. And this is when I was talking about the ways of communicating in the 15-minute one-to-one sessions, because challenges at home will pose a challenge in your work, especially if you're working from home. So it's important that as a leader, you are not, it's not about being understanding or allowing things to slide, but it's more in the sense of supporting your employees and helping them manage whatever challenges they have at home that might impact on their workload or that might impact on their performance, specifically when it comes to things such as childcare, or it
Yeah.
comes to having elderly parents that are living in the house with you, that you're worried about them, or in regards of what does this mean for them and what does this mean for you.
And CK, this goes right back to that ways of communication, doesn't
Yeah.
it? Because it might be that an individual wants to have some flexible working hours, and actually emails are going to work best for them because they can pick them up late at night and they
Yeah.
can deal with it, after their child has gone to sleep. So this comes part and parcel of understanding what it is that your employee needs from you.
Exactly. And it's even like looking at new and measurable metrics of success. So one of the ways that we have to, as an organization, is actually look at, okay, what metrics can we what can we put in place that would actually be able to showcase the level of success that we're achieving, because now we're looking at it differently. The performance and how are we recording this, it's going to have to all be different. Now it's remote. So how can you address that, and who can you kind of have a chat with? It's always great to get your employees involved in things like this, because your employees know more about the metrics because they're working on it each and every single day. So as a manager and sometimes as a leader, you only get to see the final result, whereas your employees are involved in the initial stages, from the creating to designing, before even output gets there. And you can understand exactly where you
That's
might need
right.
to kind of cut off a couple of things. Maybe you might need to implement a new process because the old one isn't working, because it's the model is not applicable when it comes to hybrid working.
Yeah.
That might be a new way of looking at it. The likes of having little chats regards with employees of what do you need help on? Is there something that we might be able to facilitate better training, perhaps? So one thing that I noticed when it came to remote working was that not everybody was as comfortable with using the technology as others would have been. I'm a tech
Absolutely.
enthusiast. I've always been a tech enthusiast. And it's one of the things where I was like, if it wasn't for the fact that I love people so much, I probably would have ended up somewhere in tech. But it's something that even my mom has said to me before as a child, is that I always want to find out how something works myself. So, I wasn't used to using Zoom, but I ensured that I kind of went in and I did the adequate training for it. I made sure that I was able to utilize the buttons. What is it that I need to know about Zoom? How can I use Zoom effectively? And essentially that's it. And that might be what a leader might need to have to do, is have to organize training in order to facilitate this. Who is uncomfortable on, it's even the sense of addressing people who may not be uncomfortable on video chat. And these are the same people who would not be taking selfies and don't have a lot of pictures on their Facebook or even on their
Absolutely.
LinkedIn. Or even think about any times that you and the staff might gather together and you take group photos. Isn't there always somebody who's like, oh no, I don't want to be in
Yeah,
the
I'll take the
picture?
photo. It's okay.
Yeah, I'll take the photo, it's fine. And that's exactly what it might be. So that's something that needs to be addressed. And I don't mean in the sense of you need to fix it. It's more in the sense of assisting this person to be comfortable, because this is what work is going to be like for them. Or it might be having to find a different way. So like you said before, it might be just having to pick up the phone and call them, and they're maybe happier to communicate that way. The clarifying the roles amongst the team is to kind of help the leader essentially themselves be able to not get bottlenecked. So if you're clarifying roles, like I'm known as the person who does the social media a lot of the time. So usually with the social medias, it'd be like, talk to EK about it and she'd be
Yeah.
able to help you in
And
something out there.
that could be the training that you were talking about for Zoom. Have
Exactly.
someone in your team who's an expert, who
Yeah,
you can say, if you're unsure, go to that person. They know more
exactly.
about it than I do.
Exactly. And you're playing to people's strengths here as well. And I don't know about you, but it makes me feel really important. It makes me feel recognized, and like, you know, it's a really kind of staple in the team that like I'm known for social media management, or I'm known
Absolutely.
for getting things out that way. And there might be someone else who's known more in regards of how to facilitate trainings on Zoom, or it might be someone who could help you with writing policies, the documentation, different areas and different things. And this is why it's really important for that, because then as a leader, it's not about freeing up your time, but it's more about kind of encouraging that social interaction within the team. So rather than them always going to you, you're always going to be the main point of contact. This way there might be 2 or 3 other people that they might go to, and they'll go to you for kind of like the final decision.
Absolutely. They'll escalate.
Exactly.
And this, I think, really links in nicely to utilizing that technology, because it's going to be different for every organization, isn't it? So, and I think as any potential leader who's maybe thinking about, you know, applying, they might be it could be a bit daunting really to think, what system is it that they're using? And actually it could be a really great question, and really, you know, show that you're interested in the company for you to ask that at interview. What systems do you use to communicate with your employees? How do you help your managers to, you know, to manage, you know, to people manage? And they might just simply be using Zoom, but there are so many other applications, aren't there, CK?
There is. This is not even the half of it when I kind of went on my when I went on my journey of discovery for the technology that are being used. So much has come up. Even a lot of these are, they're not even like a year old just yet, because they've just come out. They identified a niche or a gap in the market that was like, people are not being able to use specific systems. So for instance, if you think of Asana is great for project management, because you can keep everything and everyone in there, so you can have little team meetings, as well as being able to see exactly what the project entails, how far you are in timelines, and who's doing what. You know, and that I think is really, really important. Slack is really great for kind of like back and forth and having those conversations and being able to go on from there. One of my favorites, I have to say, is Google Drive, because it's so easily accessible and it's easy to use as well. And me and Sarah would be kind of avid users of Google Drive, and it's the same thing with the team, because it's current, it's up to date, so you don't have to worry about, oh, I've made an addition and, you know, I need to email to tell everyone I've made this update, because it's live, which means when you go into it, you're going to see it. You're going to see it straight away. And there's others that I haven't included here, but it's only because we don't have all day to go
we don't have all day. That's absolutely right. But it's going. I think the important thing here is that it's going to be different for different employees and employers. You know, the firewalls, I know, play you know, a big part in decision making of what systems are being used. So it really is about, as a potential leader, you understanding what it is that your, you know, employer is going to be using, and making sure that you are getting adequate training to support your team, but also that you have someone within your team who can be that expert that you can go to.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
So let's take a look now at kind of overcoming barriers. I mean, there can be so many barriers, I think, to communications, that, I mean, the list can go on really, but it's really around, I think, the you know, personal preference, really, isn't it? About, you know, the individual, is that the way that they want you to communicate with them? You know, do they have perhaps a disability that requires you to communicate in a different way? You know, are there cultural differences? You know, for example, do they, you know, have prayer time, for example, that requires them to be away from the computer at certain times? You know, all of these things, I think you've got to be aware of as a potential leader, and take into consideration when you're communicating with your team.
Exactly. And it's just the considerations that we have here. It's some, but definitely not all of them, like always. But it's more in the sense of, one of the things that I would always encourage potential leaders to do is have a conversation with your employee on how they want to be managed and how they like to be managed. Some employees benefit from having that level of accountability and responsibility, where they feel that we're trusted to do our jobs and we can perform, and that we don't need to be kind of you know, checked in on via email, or having to continuously leave a status update. And that also kind of falls back into the type of technology that you're using, because once you start to become comfortable with it, and as a leader, you might be able just to have a look in regards of, what is the status of the project? You know, how far are you in regards of being able to deliver on the deadline that has been set in there, if you have to push it back, these are the things that can kind of help you with managing that as well. So it's really, really good. And then you might look at managing your culture then as well. The type of culture that you have, you are essentially kind of the leader, so you get to kind of decide in regards to the kind of culture you want to build in the team. And this might be something that you could do, is focus more on building the culture, and less on the sense of like who's doing what, where are they, and how are they doing it. And it's more about the culture. And we can talk about managing expectations, not tasks. So when I say manage expectations and not tasks, it's not to actually go in and be like, have the emails been sent? Has this person been contacted? You know, kind of going bit by bit. It's more in the sense of the expectation. What is the expectation? Everyone is going to have the email sitting in their inbox by a certain time, and it's going to have all the new processes, and everybody's going to have that communicated out to them in their preferable method, if that's what it is, and be able to go on from there. It's also about trusting. It's hard, and I know this is really hard, because when you don't have visibility that people are doing what they say they're doing, it does get a little bit hard. But trust your team.
Absolutely. And going back to the report that I mentioned at the start, you know, I think it was almost 40% of individuals had said that they are working overtime when they're working remotely. You know, people are not sitting at home watching Netflix. If you know, as much as people would like to think that that's what they're doing, working remotely, they're just not. They're working really hard, and you have to remember that different people you know, work to deadlines in different ways. Some people, you know, like to be prepared ahead of the deadline, and other people, if you give them a deadline, they'll work up to the 12th hour. They'll absolutely get it done, but they will work right up to that deadline. So if you've given them a deadline, like you say, it's that element of trust that they're going to deliver on time. You've told them when the deadline is, so let them deliver.
Exactly. And then we have the fail forward attitude. This is actually my favorite, because I'm a firm believer that we don't have failures, we have lessons that we learn. So it might be the sense of sometimes sharing any mistakes that you might have made at the beginning of your role, just to get somebody else more comfortable with the sense of it's okay to make mistakes, because that's how we learn. I'll give you one mistake that I made in HR. I added an extra 5,000 in someone's contract of employment, you know, 5,000 that the company didn't have, and something like that. But what did that teach me? It taught me to be a bit more vigilant when it came to writing up contracts, and even just having a sense of, what I like to do now is, if there's an important document that I need to send off and it's just having attention to detail, I might draft it in the morning. And then what I'll do is, before I send it, I'll leave it in the morning and I'll leave it my drafts. Then I'll come back to it later on, after I've gone through my day and did everything else, and then look at it with fresh eyes. Now, depending on the documentation, basically what has to be sent out, I might have somebody else kind of glance an eye onto it, just to see and spot any mistakes that I might have. And that fail forward attitude just is a way of not, and it's not about being reprimanded for your mistakes, or it's not about encouraging mistakes, but it's more in the sense of enabling your employee to be able to make mistakes, to learn from them, and be able to share their experience with other employees so that they don't make the same mistake. That's what it means when you say fail forward attitude, because the attitude that you approach to making your mistakes is essentially how you will learn. So if you go in and thinking like, I'm not going to make any mistakes, I'm going to be perfect, I'm going to be great, and if you make a mistake now, all of a sudden, does that mean that you're not great? Absolutely not. It doesn't take away from your capabilities or competencies at all. It just means that you are a human being, and you have not been programmed to, you know, do everything the correct way, because you are going to make a mistake, and that's okay. And essentially overcoming these barriers will help employees to feel more trusted, and you'll have trust within the relationship in the department. You'll have higher levels of productivity and performance, as well as low levels of turnover, because everybody feels heard. Everybody feels as if the manager cares about them and has worked and is supporting them as well. And then last but certainly not least is accountability and that confidence in their abilities. And I think that's so important, because no one wants to be sitting at home wondering, you know, am I doing a good job? Am I doing an okay job? You know, am I meeting that level of competency that the organization has set? And that can be very it can cause you to get, like, it knocks down your confidence a bit in that sense, you know, that kind of way. And it really kind of gets you doubting your abilities, and then you're questioning about, like, should I be here? Should I not be here? And you don't want to have that. You don't want to be sitting at home wondering, and you don't want any of your employees or your team to be sitting at home wondering.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think the only thing that it leaves us with is talking a little bit about what it is that individuals can do moving forward.
Yeah.
We've got some great suggestions here of things that are really kind of, I think, quick wins for everyone who might be either potential leader or a current leader. So number one is going to be absolutely making sure that you're familiar with the different applications that are going to be useful for your team. It's not going to be all of those applications that we had on the slides. It could be different ones that we've mentioned, but what is most going to benefit your team, and what does your current or future employer use? The next thing that I would suggest all individuals do is create a SWOT analysis. So that's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. If you're not familiar with a SWOT analysis, let's take a look on YouTube. There's plenty of other videos around there about that. But use this tool to identify what the different ways of communicating are and how that might work with your team, so that you know what is the best method of communication for those particular members. There's so much learning and resources out there for you to, build up your communication styles and feel more confident about communicating in different ways. We mentioned a few, coaching, training, active listening. So if you're unfamiliar with any of those terms, take a look at all of the free training available. There's plenty on LinkedIn as well as on YouTube. And then finally, if you are already in a team, or if you're thinking about being in a team, make sure that you have set aside time to really get to know your colleagues and potential team members, so that you can build up that relationship early, because that is going to be key to having effective communication, whether it's face-to-face or remote.
Exactly. And just in regards of how else can you prepare, it's essential that you remember that a lot of us are only experiencing this for the first time, and it's okay to play around with different technologies to really test out what's working and what's not working. So just because a specific system has been in place for a really long time is now being utilized, it might be worth kind of reviewing. You never know that you might be that person to kind of come in and be like, it doesn't really work, because given our team, given the amount of people that are on the team, and given the the lack of social interaction, because of the fact that we're all working from home, this system might be better actually suitable for the team that we have, to be able to facilitate that work, that inclusivity, and actually feeling as if you really belong in part of a team, rather than feeling like you're just working for yourself at home.
That's
that
right.
You get a magic paycheck that arrives in your bank account every month. Exactly. So it's just important to remember that. And like I said, we just, in regards of the technology piece, you can play around with them. There's free trials, and you can actually get a chance to use it and experience it before making that decision. So it doesn't have to be something such as you being as a leader has to make the correct decisions all the time.
Absolutely.
You can test things out first and then see whether or not they're being used. And that actually goes great hand in hand with the likes of the SWOT analysis, because you're really getting to see where the strengths are, the weaknesses, and the opportunities that you have to grow, as well as the challenges that you'll be facing as well. I don't like the word threats. I just feel like it's very aggressive. So I'm going to say challenges instead.
Absolutely. Well, CK, thank you so much for joining me again on this YouTube. It's been lovely to have you, and I hope everyone who's been listening today has found it useful. Thank you, and goodbye.
Thanks, guys.